Hasn't been involved in this company in any meaningful way, my father said to the mediator, his voice measured, practiced. My stepmother nodded beside him. It would be an administrative correction. Nothing more. I didn't answer. I didn't look at either of them. I kept my hands flat on the table and let the silence do what silence does best. The conference room on the 14th floor of Hartwell & Associates smelled like recycled air and expensive coffee. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced downtown Atlanta, and the late morning sun cut sharp lines across the carpet. There were 6 people in the room. My father, my stepmother, their attorney, a compact man named Greer who wore his confidence like a second suit. My attorney, sitting to my right with a yellow legal pad in the unhurried manner of someone who had already done the hard work. The mediator, a woman in her 50s who had probably heard every version of this story before. And me. I had driven 4 hours to be here. I hadn't slept well, but I sat straight, shoulders back, breathing steady, because I had learned a long time ago that how you hold your body tells people what you think of yourself. And I had nothing to be ashamed of. The mediator reviewed the summary one more time. A privately held company founded by my grandfather, passed to my father, now valued somewhere in the range of $12 million. A family shareholders agreement signed when I was 19. My name on it, my signature, 17% of the company, designated to me upon my grandfather's recommendation. The same grandfather who had watched me shadow him every summer from the time I was 8 years old, learning the business, learning what it meant to build something that lasted. That agreement had been quietly amended 2 years ago. My name, replaced with my stepmother's. The revision filed with the company's registered agent in Georgia. No one had called to tell me. I found out the way you find out about things that were never supposed to reach you at all, through a cousin who said something she assumed I already knew. Greer leaned forward. The original agreement, he said, was a goodwill gesture. It was never intended to confer permanent equity. The language was aspirational, not binding. He folded his hands. My client's daughter chose to step away from the family business and pursue her own path. The amendment simply reflects the operational reality of who has been contributing. Aspirational. That was a new one. My stepmother looked at the mediator with the expression she reserved for people she needed to believe her. Earnest, slightly wounded, reasonable. We never wanted conflict, she said. We just needed the company's ownership structure to reflect who was actually doing the work. My father didn't look at me. He was staring at the window. He had always been better at delivering these things when he didn't have to watch you receive them. I had spent the last 8 months building a file, not in anger, in habit. I was a forensic accountant. Precision was not a skill I had to practice. It was the thing I did when I got out of bed in the morning. My attorney set a hand lightly on the table, a small signal. Not yet. I waited. I didn't grow up expecting to inherit anything. That's not quite accurate. I grew up in a house where inheritance was something you earned through proximity, and proximity required compliance. My grandfather was the exception. He didn't care about compliance. He cared about understanding. He used to bring me to the company warehouse on Saturday mornings when I was a kid and quiz me on inventory while he drank burnt coffee from a paper cup. He never talked down to me. He showed me spreadsheets the way other grandfathers showed kids how to fish, patiently, and with genuine belief that I would get it. My mother had worked alongside him for years before she got sick. She was the kind of person who made every room more organized just by walking into it. Not rigid, purposeful. She knew where everything was filed, who owed what to whom, why a particular vendor had been cut loose 7 years ago. When she died, the company lost something it never quite recovered. So did I. My father remarried 14 months later. I was 22. I was in my second year of my master's program at the University of Georgia, and I was not in a position to have opinions, or so I was made to understand. She was not unkind to me, not exactly. She was careful. Polite. She smiled at the right times and stayed out of my room and didn't try to be my mother, which I respected. What I didn't fully recognize until later was that she was also paying very close attention. She started working at the company about 6 months after the wedding, part-time at first, then full-time, then indispensable. She reorganized the administrative side. She updated systems. She hired people she already knew. She did everything right and she did it efficiently. And slowly, quietly, The company began to feel like her house rather than my grandfather's. I graduated. I took a position at a firm in Charlotte. The distance made sense, professionally, geographically, and in ways I didn't examine too closely at the time. I visited for holidays. I called my father on his birthday. I sent Christmas cards. We were civil. We were careful. We were, in every practical sense, strangers who shared a last name. My grandfather died 3 years ago. He left me a letter. In it, he said he was proud of me. He said he was proud of me. He said he hoped I would find my way back to the company someday, not because I owed it anything, but because I had a mind for it. He said my mother would have wanted that. He had signed the shareholders agreement himself, he reminded me, because he believed it, not because it was expected. I kept the letter in a fireproof box in my apartment closet. The amendment had been filed on a Tuesday in November, 19 months after my grandfather died. The timing, I would later note in my file, was not accidental. My grandfather had been the one who insisted my name be in that agreement. With him gone, there was no one left to ask why it had changed. The cousin who told me wasn't trying to cause trouble. She mentioned it at a family barbecue in passing, the way you mention something you think everyone already knows. "So I heard your dad restructured the ownership. Are you okay with that?" She had looked genuinely surprised when she saw my face. I drove home that evening and sat in my car for 20 minutes before going inside, not crying, thinking, running the sequence in my head the way I ran numbers. What was known, what was assumed, what needed to be verified. I didn't call my father. I didn't email my stepmother. I pulled up the Georgia Secretary of State's corporation database and looked up the filing myself. It was there. Public record. Signed by my father, witnessed by Greer, dated 14 months ago. I read it twice. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop and started from the beginning. The first person I called wasn't a lawyer. It was a colleague who specialized in business valuation. I asked her to help me pull a timeline of company financials going back 5 years. She didn't ask why. We had worked together long enough that she understood what it meant when I said I needed to understand something before I could decide what to do about it. What came back was careful, clean on its surface. But the dates told a story. The amendment to my equity stake had been prepared, not filed, but prepared. While my grandfather was still alive, during the last 4 months of his illness, when he was no longer reviewing documents himself. The filing had waited until after probate cleared. Whoever advised this had been thorough. It was done legally. It was not done honestly. I called an attorney I had been referred to by a colleague in Charlotte. She was sharp, direct, and had handled shareholder disputes before. When I explained the situation, she asked me one question before anything else. "What do you want out of this?" I thought about it. "I want the record corrected," I said. She paused. "Not damages, not a buyout. If my stake is restored, I'll consider selling. That's my business. But the amendment has to be undone first. I won't negotiate from a position that treats a forgery as a starting point." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay. That's actually a cleaner case. We spent 3 months preparing. I reviewed everything I could access legally. Public filings, corporate minutes that my grandfather had kept copies of, and that had been left to me as part of his personal papers, correspondence. I did not access anything I wasn't entitled to. I didn't need to. The pattern was already visible in what was available. Documents prepared quietly, language shifted incrementally, my name appearing less and less until it was simply gone. My stepmother was present in almost every material step. My father far less so. That mattered. When we requested mediation, my father agreed quickly, too quickly. He believed this would be resolved in a room, quietly with a check. He didn't understand that I wasn't there to settle. I was there to correct the record. Those are different things. The morning of mediation, I arrived 12 minutes early. I sat in the lobby and reviewed my notes one final time. Not because I had forgotten anything. Because preparation is a form of respect. For the process, for the stakes, for yourself. My attorney arrived 2 minutes later. She set her bag down and looked at me. "Ready?" "Yes." "They're gonna offer money," she said. "I know. Early. Probably before we get to the documentation phase." "Let them," she smiled briefly. "You understand this might take all day." "I've had longer days," I said. And I had. Anyone who has spent time in the forensic side of finance has sat in rooms where the truth was buried under layers of clean-looking paper and had to find it one document at a time. This was the same work. It just had my name in it this time. The mediation session opened with formalities. The mediator outlined the process. Both parties acknowledged the ground rules. Greer gave his opening summary, smooth, practiced, built entirely on the narrative of my absence and what he called my disengagement from the family enterprise. My attorney did not interrupt. She made a small note. When it was her turn, she didn't deliver a speech. She asked to submit a package of documents for the mediator's review before proceeding. The mediator agreed. Greer glanced at my father. My stepmother's hand shifted on the table. The package was not dramatic. No bombshell at the top. It was a timeline organized chronologically, cross-referenced with corporate filings, meeting minutes, and correspondence. It told the story the same way the numbers always told it, through dates, through sequences, through what happened and when and in what order relative to everything else. My stepmother's attorney objected to certain items. Some were excluded. Most were admitted. The mediator read carefully. When she looked up, she asked one question directly to Greer. Was the original shareholder? She checked the name. Was she notified of the proposed amendment before it was filed? Greer answered carefully. Notification procedures were followed per the operating agreement. That wasn't my question, the mediator said. A pause. There was no direct personal notification, he said finally. The mediator wrote something down. My father exhaled through his nose. My stepmother looked at her hands. The mediator called for a short break. When we reconvened, Greer announced that his clients were prepared to offer a settlement, a lump sum payment, in exchange for my signing a release of all claims. I let the number sit in the air for a moment. No, I said. Greer looked at me directly for the first time that morning. Ms. Muss. The amendment was filed without proper notice and executed during a period when the only person who could have objected was incapacitated, I said. I'm not here to be compensated for that. I'm here to have it corrected. My stepmother started to speak. My father put a hand on her arm. The mediator looked at me evenly. You understand that if we don't reach resolution today, this proceeds to litigation. I understand, I said. That could take years. I'm aware, I said. I'm also aware that the documentation we've submitted will become part of the public court record when that happens. The room went quiet in a specific way. Not the silence of confusion. The silence of recalculation. The break lasted 40 minutes. My attorney and I sat in a small conference room down the hall. She got us both coffee. We didn't talk about the case. We talked about a restaurant she'd been to recently, and whether the drive from Charlotte was easier going north or south on I-85. It sounds strange, maybe, but when you work in high-stakes environments, you learn to protect your calm the same way you protect your evidence. You don't let the pressure stay in your body. You set it down and pick it back up when you need it. When we returned to the main room, Greer placed a revised proposal on the table. Not money this time, a restoration of equity stake. A stipulation that the amendment had been procedurally deficient, and a clause requiring confidentiality. I read it carefully. My attorney leaned in and we conferred in low voices. The confidentiality clause, I said to the mediator. Remove it. Greer looked up. That's a standard provision. It's standard when both parties want to avoid scrutiny, I said. I don't have anything to hide. If the record is corrected, it should be correctable on the record. My father spoke for the first time since the opening. His voice was quieter than I remembered it being in that room. This doesn't need to be public. I looked at him. It was the first time we had made direct eye contact that day. You made it public when you filed the amendment, I said. It's already on record. I'm just asking that the correction be on record, too. He didn't answer. He looked at the window again. After another hour of negotiation, back and forth, details, language, specifics, the confidentiality clause was removed. The equity restoration was documented. The amendment was officially characterized as procedurally deficient and reversed. When the mediator gathered the final signed copies, she looked at me briefly, not with admiration, just with recognition. The look of someone who has seen many versions of a situation and understood which version this was. The parking garage was cool and dim. My attorney walked me to my car. "You know," she said, "most people in your position take the money." "I know," I said. "It's faster?" "Faster isn't always better." She considered that. "What are you going to do with the stake?" "Sell it," I said. "Eventually, at fair market value, through the proper process." She laughed a little. "Of course you are." I drove back toward Charlotte in the early afternoon, the Atlanta skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror. I kept the radio off for the first hour. I needed the quiet to process, not to feel victorious. I didn't. Not exactly. I felt the way you feel at the end of a long, meticulous audit when the numbers finally reconcile. Not relief. Accuracy. The sense that things are where they belong. My father called that evening. I was home, shoes off, sitting on my couch with a cup of tea and a stack of mail I'd been ignoring for 2 weeks. I answered. "You could have come to me first," he said. "I tried," I said. "You were unavailable." He was quiet. That wasn't entirely fair. I hadn't tried very hard, and both of us knew it. But the reason I hadn't tried was also something both of us knew, and neither of us said. "She wasn't trying to cut you out," he said finally. "She was trying to protect what we built." "I understand," I said, and I did, in the way you understand why someone does something without agreeing that they had the right to. "But you can't protect something you built together with my grandfather by removing the people he chose to include. That's not protection, that's revision." A long pause. "He really liked you," my father said. His voice had changed. It was softer, older sounding, more than he ever told me. I didn't say anything for a moment. "I know," I said. "I should have said something when she started the paperwork," he said quietly. "I knew something felt off. I let it go." "Yes," I said, "you did." It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't ready to call it that. But it was the first honest thing he had said to me in years, and I let it be what it was. We said goodbye without making plans, without promises, without performing anything for each other. Just two people who had reached the edge of a hard conversation and stepped back from it carefully. The equity sale took several months. My attorney handled the process. The valuation was completed by an independent firm, as required. The price was fair. The transfer was clean. I signed the documents in my apartment on a Wednesday morning before work, at my kitchen table, with a cup of coffee going cold beside me. I set aside a portion of the proceeds. Half of it went into a fund I had been thinking about for a long time. A small scholarship for first-generation college students pursuing business or accounting degrees, established in my mother's name. It wasn't large. It was enough to matter. The kind of thing that doesn't make headlines but changes the specific, real life of one person every year. The other portion I donated to a nonprofit in Atlanta that provided financial literacy education in underserved communities. Budgeting, credit, small business basics. The kind of information that keeps people from being erased by paperwork they don't understand. I did not issue a press release. I did not post anything. I filed the foundation documents with the state and went back to work. About a month later, I found a box in my storage unit that I hadn't opened since the move from my father's house. Inside were some things I had kept without fully knowing why. A photo of my mother and me at a company picnic when I was maybe 10, my grandfather's business card from the original print run, worn at the edges, the logo slightly different from the one they use now. And at the bottom, a note my grandfather had slipped into my graduation card that I had forgotten I still had. It said, "The numbers always tell the truth if you let them. Your job is to let them." I read it twice. I set it on my desk where I could see it. People talk about winning like it requires someone else to lose loudly. Like justice needs noise to be real. In my experience, that's not true. The most durable form of justice is a corrected record. Something that exists independently of how anyone feels about it. Something that doesn't require anyone's agreement or acknowledgement to be true. They had amended my name out of a document, because they believed paperwork was the same as reality. They had counted on my silence and my distance as evidence of my absence. What they hadn't anticipated was that the same precision I had spent a decade developing professionally was the exact tool I needed to take apart everything they had built around that assumption. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't issue ultimatums. I didn't ask for an apology because apologies don't correct records. I just let the numbers tell the truth. And they did. If this story stayed with you, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had to fight to be recognized in something that was already yours? Or maybe you've seen someone else go through it and didn't know how to help. Whatever it is, I'm reading every one of them. And if you're new here, this is what we do. We tell the quiet stories, the patient ones, the ones where justice shows up in the fine print. Subscribe if that's the kind of thing you want to see more of. I'll be here.